welcome everyone to the 10x Go to Market podcast. I am so excited to have Jason here. For those of you that this might be your first kind of AMA podcast live with the Pocus crew, this is really an opportunity for you to ask leaders and experts in go to market like Jason all of your burning questions that you have. And I'm selfishly very excited to have Jason here. Jason, I've learned so much from in all things sales. I also really am fortunate to work with Jason as a customer of Skits. And so we've had early days of Focus. We had other folks from Monday here. Now we have you. So I'm very excited. Quick intro to Jason. He is the director of sales for North America at Monday.com. Previously, he's had lots of different sales leadership roles at various different companies and startups. And so I'm excited to have you here. Do you want to do a quick introduction, Jason?
Yeah, sure. So Jason Miller, you already said that part. Been with Monday for the greater 6 years now. So it's very early on, especially in the creation of the New York office and the North American region. To your point, I've been in sales in many different facets. I think I'm one of those folks that kind of like accidentally fell into sales. Almost, it's like you don't know what you want to do, and sales is always there. It's kind of what I call the you go to college and you study business because you don't know what else to study, and then it kind of turned into this. So I've got a lot of different kind of interesting stints and pieces of my background to pull from, which I think I've always found it interesting, and then how that applies to the role that you're in now or future roles that you go to.
We hear this a lot from people. I accidentally fell into sales. I didn't wake up one morning and think I want to be a salesperson. How did that look for you?
How does it look for me? Let's see. I mean, it goes back to like the first job. I mean, yeah, first job like in a restaurant or something like that. But then it's like, okay, you're trying to find like internships, or I think this was back in the day. I mean, I'm not like that old, but you like remember when my mom would say, find a job, and you look in the newspaper, right? And you kind of like find the job ads. And there, I mean, I'm like a former Cutco guy. For those of you that know what that is, like I think when I was 18, probably my first summer from college, and so like think you just kind of find it. You find your way, and you find that early knack, whether you like working with other people. It's obviously a very people centric job, and uh, I think from there it's kind of just grown. I did internships in like business development departments for like Pebble Beach in college. So in kind of the hospitality space, I spent time in insurance. I spent time in staffing. I found my way to SaaS, and I think I'll be in SaaS for a very long time from here on out, till AI takes over everything.
We'll get there later. Monday.com has been an incredible company to watch, and the growth is just fantastic. And you were there pre-IPO. So you were there, I think, so you were there in the early days of building the sales team. So I'm curious, how does it look 6 years ago? And what were the different evolutions and maybe chapters of sales at Monday? And what does it look like now?
Yeah. So if you look at Monday, I mean, it really got up and going like early 2014, I would say, is when there was really like a sellable product. And sellable for us was the true PLG motion. When you look at Rory and Iran, the founders and who are the co-CEOs today, their vision was to actually never have a sales team. They just thought that this would just be a PLG motion through and through. And then there were some, I mean, obviously very instrumental individuals that kind of convinced them otherwise. And so it was kind of 2016-ish that they really started to stand up a sales organization to work with very kind of specific types of companies that were coming into Monday. And I think they found very early on they could get a lot of people to buy Monday, but it would be in very small instances, right? Or very small deployments. It truly takes an individual to speak with them about a lot of the benefits that it can bring across an organization. And so that's where sales has been aimed really ever since day one. And I think for us, if I go back to the sales, whatever in 2018, something like that. Um, I don't think it's changed too much in terms of how we're selling. I think it's just changed to what's changed is who we're selling to, right? And that can be the upmarket game. Upmarket can mean a lot of different things to different people. Sometimes people hear upmarket and they just think, oh, it's up into the enterprise, it's into the Fortune 500. I like to take a more simplistic view of upmarket. Upmarket can just mean you're doing larger deployments or bigger deals within your existing customer base or within your sweet spot today. So I think it's just how are you elevating all facets of the way that you do sales? Obviously, was still the end game of yes, can you sell to the bigger organizations?
So something we've talked about a bunch is you originally to get to the stage that Monday is today. You've done a lot of prospecting into your self-serve install base, looking at the PLG users, running a really solid product-led sales motion where you consolidate these users and run a sales motion from there.
Right.
Now you're moving more towards a intentional outbound motion of we actually need to move from, not just converting users, but going outbound and having an account strategy, and being more prescriptive or proactive there. So can you talk about that evolution of what those days look like of relying on inbound or install base? And then why do you have to go outbound now and how are you going to go do it?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're definitely seeing a shift is probably the wrong word for it, in the landscape. I think for us, it's more Monday has been an incredible growth story, and we want to maintain that level of growth. And in order to hit or maintain those levels of growth, you need to deploy new strategies, right? And so as you start to talk about outbound being one of them, I think we're frankly just scratching the surface at outbound, which is really exciting because it makes you realize how much greenfield or green space is still in front of you to continue to be wildly successful. But it's a definite shift in the mindset for a lot of folks that have been here for a long time. I mean, everyone will say this, but I think of it true for Monday. Like every organization is special in its own way, right? And I think that we've got a unique culture and a unique DNA where when you look at the tenure of individuals that have been here, you have a lot of people that get here and they stay
Mhm.
here. Like I
Yeah.
sometimes half-heartedly joke, but I'm not. If we had even the average turnover of a normal sales organization, we'd be in a lot of trouble because we're very specific on who we hire, and we will not just hire to fill a seat. Like, we'll be very intentional with those because of what we're trying to build. So then as I go back to kind of your question around outbound and the mindset perspective, it can be easy to just talk to the folks that are coming in to you today. And when you're talking to folks that come in today, I don't think you need as strong of a point of view in the market as you do when you're talking to someone that doesn't necessarily know you or you went to them, right? So you can engage these folks that are coming inbound. They inherently have some interest, right, and some propensity to buy, and you can talk to them a lot about their problems or problems generally relate to what you solve. You can obviously get deeper into how it's impacting the business and what we can deliver. But when you start to go outbound or start talking to folks, like again, upmarket, let's talk about that. Upmarket can mean selling to a more senior buyer within your sweet spot, at least to me. So if you're moving now from director to VP or selling more VP to the C suite, what is that message and what a COO cares about is going to be a lot different than what the director of operations cares about. They're going to have the same theme, but the thing that that person is trying to solve in that given day or given week is going to be a bit different. And so I think that's the continual shift that we're working on always is, do we truly understand our buyer and what our buyer cares about? And the last thing I'll say was something like Monday, it can be difficult. I came from HR tech prior to this. So it's one or two personas that you really need to master. Monday can almost be anything to anybody, which also makes the outbound strategy difficult.
Yeah.
And so you need to really know a lot about at least a core 4 or 5 buyers.
Yep, totally. Super, super interesting. Something I'd be want to talk about is the kind of beauty, but also the pain in having a horizontal product. Because what you just mentioned is we need to value sell more and we need to have a strong point of view. But that point of view is going to look different depending on the level of person you're talking to, as well as the team and department that they're on, I'm sure.
Very
So
much.
how do you actually make that happen? Like, are you training reps on if someone's in this vertical, you have this type of insight. If someone's this seniority, you have this type of kind of messaging?
Yes and no. I think I see it as 2 sides. There's only so much that we can provide to people. It's kind of the, are you fishing for them or teaching them to fish, right? The kind of the cliche analogy. And so I'm really trying to move towards the critical thinking side. Like I was talking about outbound. Like I did a fairly intensive prospecting boot camp last week. We spent 7 hours with the AEs on this. And a lot of times it's the questions come up of like, what am I supposed to say? Or what does this person care about? And the whole training was about not giving that to them. It's like, I need you to think through those things because then it starts to think, or then it starts to stick, or they can start to think about it more critically across other personas when we're not in more of a training in environment. So yes, with a horizontal product where where your goal is to get across the organization, yes, it's understanding what any individual buyer cares about, and or with something like Monday, how do departments work together or where do workflows start and stop? So take marketing, for example. Marketing is running campaigns and events and interest in the organization or the product, right? But then what is the product of all of that? The product of all of that generally for the organization is going to be some sort of lead or something leading to revenue. So, okay, if marketing is working with Monday in that type of process, the next logical place would be, okay, when you bring a lead in, where does that lead go for you today? Do you have visibility when the sales team takes it on? Do you have understanding how that lead works through from lead to qualified opportunity through sales cycle to buyer? Right, and now you're in a CRM conversation, right? And Monday can be vertically led for the Work OS product, or we have a multi-product strategy in terms of CRM and service and dev. And so it's understanding how you kind of jump from group to group based upon the existing work that's being done.
So how do you create the right incentives so that sales reps aren't just doing the quote unquote easy path or the reactive path of a user's on Monday, I'm going to jump in there versus doing maybe the quote unquote harder path or the proactive path of I'm going to actually do a more holistic account strategy and multi-thread and come with a point of view. Because if I were a rep, I would want to just do the fastest path to hitting my number, which would likely be reaching out to a user.
Yeah. And I think that that's fine. I mean, I have nothing against starting with a user, right? And I look at it in two ways. It's like, okay, you need to do one of two things. Obviously, you need to grow within that organization. And there are two ways to grow. You could either grow through the person, a user today, and someone that you're working with, whether they're a coach or whether they're a champion of sorts, or you have to get into other facets of the organization through your own prospecting. And so if they are reaching out to a user, it's making sure that they have the wherewithal to know what the end goal of that conversation is. Rarely is someone just going to lead you to growth within the organization. It does happen, right? That's fine. But if you're going to be one of those people who are consistently hitting their number or being where you want to be, where you're really excelling on your number, you have to help create the path with your user, your champion, whomever it is. So for example, what I ask a lot of reps to do is identify where you're trying to go with the organization and try to figure out how does this person or this workflow touch those other facets, right? If you think of the C-suite as swim lanes, you've got the CMO, you've got the CIO, you've got the CTO, right? Okay, if you're here, how does that relate to what these people care about? And can you open up a conversation at a more strategic company level that might get them to think of Monday in a different light? I also think referrals are big. We talked a lot about that last week in this training, but I think a lot of sales reps still don't ask for referrals enough. And I used to live and die by referrals in former sales jobs, and so I understand how critical it can be, and also how successful it can be if done right. And so sometimes it's just helping them understand that you have a desire to grow in these areas of the business, and you're going to kind of go explore them with or without that individual. And if they kind of understand that you're going to be doing that even without them, they'll generally open the door for you in those cases.
Tactically, how do you go about teaching your reps to ask for referrals? Because it has to be delicate in the way that you want to make sure your customers add value and they're happy with Monday. And, it kind of is a give without a get. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah. Um, so I think in this one, it's helping them realize the quality of the ask as a
Mhm.
referral. And does somebody understand why you're making the ask? I think this is even a larger kind of concept that I talk to a lot of folks about is anytime you ask a question, does somebody understand where the context of that question came from? And I'll give you an example in my everyday life. This was years ago, but right, we were looking for a new daycare, right, for our daughter at the time. And we're in the center, and my wife and I are kinda like private folks. Like, if you just, like, randomly ask me where I work, like, I'm not really into talking about that, right? And we're touring the center, and the woman just turns to us, and she says, "What companies do you work for?" And we kinda look at each other and like, "Why does that matter and related to the conversation?" And so we kind of like haphazardly tell the individual, and then she's like, "Oh, I actually think that company is on the list for benefits with our company." Right? Now, had she reframed that question of saying, "Hey, wanna ask you something. We actually have relationships with some companies out there that give you preferential pricing or XYZ. Wanna see if you're on that list. What company do you work for?" We'd be getting the words out of our mouth faster than she could finish the question. So if you go back to, like, the referral ask,
Good example.
yeah, so if you go back to the referral ask, this can relate to any question that you're asking in the sales process. But you go back to the referrals, this is one where, kind of going against what I said earlier, that I did kind of script it for them just a little bit. Um, but I think it's letting the person know what your how you're measured as a sales individual, right? There's no secret that you are a sales individual, that you don't think you need to hide behind those things. And so I generally tell reps, like, let them know, like, "Hey, your role is measured in 2 ways. Your role is measured on bringing new clients into Monday and their success with Monday, i.e., the person that I'm talking to right now. My other piece of my job that I'm measured on is actually growth within those companies in the first year." Right? And you kinda take them down this path of understanding where the ask is coming from, and now I feel more connected to you and where this is coming, and there's almost like a sense of wanting to help that individual, assuming you've done good work with them, and then there's kind of a script for going into the ask.
The why is so important. That example was I like that. I didn't know where you were going with it at first, and then you've really landed the plane, and I am gonna use that as an example going forward. That's
Yeah, sometimes I go off on these weird tangents, but I try to bring it back. Yeah.
Oh, it was great. So we talked about how you have such good you have sellers that have been here for years and years, and I mean, I can say the people on your team are fantastic. You truly have some of the best reps in all of tech companies that I've worked with. What do you look for in hiring these reps? And then the second thing is, it feels like Monday is evolving so fast that every year, every 2 years, it's almost a different or evolved sales motion. So are you kind of bringing in new types of talent? Are you up leveling the folks? Like, how do you hire them? And then how do you make sure they're keeping up with the pace of Monday's pace?
Yeah, so 2 things. I think if you hire for the right type of individual, that individual can handle ideally all of the change management that you're gonna throw at them. And so I look for I mean, obviously, the quantitative is important based upon how someone has performed
Yeah.
in past jobs, but I also think it's way too easy to fudge numbers, right? Anyone can put anybody on anything on a resume and talk to you, about anything. And I'll give you another example. Numbers don't always mean anything. You can hit 110% in the company and be dead last in the sales team. You could be hitting 73%
So
and
true.
be number 1 in a sales organization, right? So I think as an interviewer, you have to be very good at uncovering, like, what those numbers actually mean. So for me, I think there's a couple of core pillars that I go off of. I look for individuals that are very process driven in the way that they work. Like, can they describe to me why they are successful in their role? How do they approach their day? How do they approach their week? How do they approach their territory? How do they approach their sales cycles? We still in our process have clients go through like a mock role play, right? So an example, right? And I'm sure candidates will start to watch this. Here's the secret, right? If you tell me you follow Sandler or you follow Medic or you follow, Spiced or whatever, Winning by Design, whatever it's out there, like, I know them all at least in a rudimentary fashion. If you tell me you do something and then in the role play you don't do it, you'll get nixed immediately, right? It means you're telling me something, but you don't actually have a process for it. You think you have a process, but the process doesn't follow through. So again, that's like one example. So I want people
Yeah.
that are very process oriented because those people build good foundations that you can build on top of. So as we change our processes, they're very sound at this level. I can start adding on level 2, level 3, whatever. Um, I think self-awareness is a big piece of it as well. So I'll go back to the example of regardless of how you performed, like, where do you fall within your sales team, right? Are you number 1? Are you number 3? Are you number 10? Are you in the upper 20%? Are you in the 50th percentile? And then why do you land there? I think it's really important to understand why your performance is the way that it is, And I will tend to lean into somebody that has very good self-diagnosis because if you know yourself, you're gonna be able to get better a lot faster. Either you can find the resources, we can provide the resources, your manager can coach to it. But no one's gonna know yourself like yourself. It's impossible. Manager only gets so much limited time. They can only listen to so many gong calls. So the more you can surface what you care about and why you want to, where you want to get better, it's gonna accelerate that path. And then the third piece, which leans into that, is coachability. And so there has to be a yin and a yang between the things you want to get better at and the ability to be humble enough to see your blind spot as being raised by your manager and really lean into the things that they care about.
I'm stealing that question, around where do you rank on your team and why? I'd be curious, something that you mentioned was to figure out if they're process oriented is how do you spend your day, how do you spend your week?
Yeah.
What is a good answer to that, and what is a bad answer to that?
Um, I I don't know if I have, like, the exact example of good and bad because it can look different, but I will say the more detail-oriented you can be, the better, and or I will ask follow-up questions, and your level of detail will help me understand, like, how much of a process do you really have? They're like, "Okay, like, I make sure to prospect every day." Okay, like, tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what did prospecting look like yesterday for you, right? And you could kinda see who's reaching at straws versus, like, who has a foundational answer for that. Do you schedule a prospecting time? Is it the same every day? If it is the same every day, like, what types of KPIs are you holding yourself accountable to? Is it a quality game? Is it a quantity game? Like, it's just like in sales, asking the second, third, fourth layer questions, you'll start to be able to understand how good of a process it is. So I'll kind of go the day or the week to kind of get the themes that they will raise, and then I'll go into okay, how process driven are they in the themes that they bring up.
It's such a good point that the why matters more than the what sometimes in terms of, a rep can say, "I spend my day prospecting." And then once you ask the second, third, fourth layer question, you can realize they're not prospecting. They're just, taking some inbound. Like you have to really dive deep to figure out why are you doing this? What's happening? And like keep asking those questions, which is super sharp. So another topic that you and I talked about, you're in an interesting position where you're both becoming an expert on managing up and managing down. And so you've worked closely with all the way up to the Monday founders and kind of the key folks on the exec team, all the way down to the individual reps. And what can happen in organizations that are scaling and growing as fast as Monday is exec team can have a strategy and there's disconnect for how the ICs need to execute. So how do you handle that communication gap and making sure everyone's kind of moving on the same page?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not easy. And I joke saying it's like the only constant in Monday is the inconstant. Like it's a constant change in an evolution. And the founders here have a fantastic vision. I think that's part of why I love Monday so much. They do take such a long-term view on where they wanna take Monday, but that can mean a lot of incremental changes, obviously, along the way. And so when you're thinking about especially that director layer, the VP layer, whatever it is, they're the ones that are really responsible for disseminating what the executives or the C-suite have in their head, and how does that tie to what like a rep is going to do day to day. And you need to feed it up both directions. Either we're moving too fast or this isn't going to work, or maybe they still have the vision and we kind of have to make it work. So then we need to take it to the kind of the ground floor. And for me, I kind of look at it in 3 facets, and it's the why. We'll go back to the why, right? That we've already talked about a lot. You'll see that as a theme, but it's the why, the what, and the how. And that's where the how we're definitely responsible for when you talk about director, VP layer. Even the managers a little bit, but they've got to kind of go off of kind of our strategic vision, hopefully. So if you're talking to the reps, hopefully they can really understand why they're making the change. Because some of the changes are not to their benefit, or they're not going to enjoy it, or it's different than what they're doing today. So there's the why of the change. What does the change then mean specifically for them in their day to day, week to week, quarter to quarter? And then if there is an up leveling in skill, hopefully, how are we gonna help them learn said skill or be enabled or make sure that they're comfortable with whatever it is that they're being asked to do? And I think that if I look back on my career, that's something that sometimes I may have taken for granted is the wrong word, but maybe overlooked. Maybe take prospecting, for example, going back to things that we've talked about in this conversation. Sometimes I may think that people already have that skill because they either had to do it years ago, or have been in some role, or just kind of comes inherently with the job, right? But in some cases, they haven't had it. Or if you think about sellers now, we're sitting in 2025 in the mid market space, you might be working with people that have 5 or 6 years of closing experience. Okay, that puts them back to the what 2019, 2020 when they started selling, and the pandemic was, I mean, a shit show for lack of better word in terms of sales process all over the place. So many things changed so quick, right? That the sometimes the foundational elements weren't there. So you kind of have to look at the journey that people have been on and what do you owe them in order for them to go out and do the things that they need to do or that you're asking them to do.
Yeah. It's, being having both to manage up and down is hard, and the why, what framework. Is this something that you do tactically at an all hands and then reinforce in one-on-ones? Like, how do you very tactically have these conversations with ICs?
Yeah, I mean, it can be in all hands. I mean, sometimes it's not relevant to everybody. So I think you do try to grab everyone that it is relevant to. And I think that message is easier given one to many, so you can take them through these things. And again, it's the why, what, how, and then you can start to siphon off and take the different groups that may need different kind of training or information or process or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think start large and then kind of work your way through the funnel of what do you need to do to get the outcome that you need.
Maybe final question, in this bridging the gap between exec and ICs, what's a mistake that you've made that you now have learned to overcome and won't make again?
Um, I think a mistake that I mean, I talked about one a little bit. I think sometimes I took the how a little bit for granted. I might assume people knew the how and then realizing either it wasn't happening or it wasn't happening fast enough. And I think at least this is my own philosophy on that. If something's not going the way you want it to go, the only place you can point is to yourself because that's the only place that it can generally get fixed. Now, that pointing at yourself might mean you need to go work with the executives, right? You might need to manage up better, but it's pointing the finger at yourself to figure out what can you do to change the narrative or change the story or change the outcome. And so, I think over time, and this is probably me becoming more comfortable with myself is just being as vocal as possible at the senior level. Like it almost doesn't matter who you're sitting down with. You're just sitting down with another person that ideally cares about this company as much as you do, right? And so you owe it to yourself and you owe it to them to be very honest with the way that you feel about the organization. That's why they've hired us in the first place. Like if you don't want me for my honesty, then I'm in the wrong place. And so I think you have to become very comfortable in maybe uncomfortable conversations that have the right perspective because you're trying to do the right thing for the company.
Yep. This was awesome, Jason. Are you now that everyone knows how to interview for you, are you hiring?
They give them every secret. I am hiring, yes. And that's funny. I will put these tidbits out there because you get the reps that do the research, right? And so
I was just gonna say, that's the best
yeah,
rep.
it's how that you did this and like they're coming with those answers. That's why I don't mind giving some of the examples. But yes, we're hiring for AEs, we're hiring for AMs, we're hiring for management. You can find me on LinkedIn, RIP my inbox. Yes, a little bit. You can find me wherever. Go to our careers page, ping me anytime. But we're always looking for good people.
Amazing. That is my favorite when someone's done the research and comes prepared. So, for everyone listening, do that for Jason. Make his job easy. But Jason, seriously, this was phenomenal. Thank you so much for being here.
Ours
Love
was always
chatting
Alexa.
with us.
Yeah, yeah. Talk soon. Thank you, everybody.
Soon.
Bye.